I'm Fred Martin. I've been practicing law for 25 years. I've retired now. Most of that time I was doing public utilities work and Aboriginal work. A lot of the Aboriginal work related to land and energy and utility things as well. So a lot of background in utilities and Aboriginal, especially the Metis settlements. Kikino is one of the Metis settlements, and it's about 45,000 hectares of land set aside exclusively for Metis use. It's about 60 kilometers south of Lac La Biche. About 1,300 people live there. It's one of 8 Metis settlements that are located in northern Alberta and cover about 640 square miles of northern Alberta. And they're unique to Alberta. They don't exist anywhere else in Canada. And they are self-governing bodies under the Metis Settlements Act. And part of the challenge facing someone on a First Nations project or a Metis settlement project is competing against the price of power from a coal-fired grid. You can't compete against it. I've been involved in a wind power project on a First Nation, and it is functioning effectively now. It's selling into the grid. But a cogeneration project that was looked into, we did a couple of feasibility studies on one of the Metis settlements, was not feasible. Part of the problem there was you didn't know the price of power into the grid. So electricity sourcing in Alberta is really based on a decision made decades ago that Alberta would be a coal-based electricity area, and the gas would be shipped for money. So when the policy came in, it made sense because we had 600 years of coal and a finite amount of gas, and it made sense to use the coal for local electrical energy and to ship the gas, which you could get more money for. That's all changed, of course, with the discoveries about climate change and the realization that coal is probably the dirtiest source of energy there is right now. So Alberta is now in a situation of having to rethink that and say what should our new energy strategies be. And I mean, personally, my strong preference is for diversification. The more you can encourage small generation units, as long as they're reasonably economic, the more you diversify the system, the more robust the system you get. And so the current policy, which is a level playing field, is a bit deceptive because the level playing field doesn't take into account, when they say the level playing field, they usually mean, well, you go in and compete with coal-fired and everybody else on the same footing. To be on a level playing field, you have to know, first of all, what are your fossil fuel subsidies? And we don't see those anywhere. I don't even know if there's been a careful analysis done in Alberta of what the fossil fuel subsidies are at the moment. And then you have no factoring in of the cost of CO2 emissions. So when we were doing the wind power project on the First Nation, and also when I've been in utility hearings in which wind power projects were trying to be brought in as part of the rate base, you have a problem of saying, well, coal is so much cheaper, but that's because you're not factoring in CO2 costs, you're not factoring in any subsidies that are in there, you're not looking at tax breaks, and any accurate economic analysis would have to factor in all of these factors and say, okay, what is a level playing field? Well, I probably covered it already in what I just said, but I believe you need a top level commitment that says we are going to try and get a handle on exactly what energy is costing. It's not just short term, but long term, because we always have a problem of thinking on a 4-year time horizons, because that's what people are elected for, municipally for 3 years. And it's very difficult for someone who's elected on a 4-year time horizon to think on 20, 30, or 50-year time horizons. And we don't have any mechanism for weighing that kind of a timeline. Now, federally, theoretically, that's what the Senate was about. It hasn't really worked out that way. But I think what we need provincially is some way of reflecting those long-term impacts, some way of reflecting the price of carbon realistically, some way of reflecting the fact that we are going to have to do something about Alberta's carbon footprint, not just because we want to, or not just because we're good guys, but because there are going to become pressures from Ottawa, and there are going to become pressures from the United States that says, look, the oil sands maybe we can give you, but we can't give you the oil sands and the dirty coal. So you're going to have to come up with some new options. And I think those kinds of things have to be on the mind of government policymakers in terms of saying, how are we going to grow renewables in Alberta so that we can work our way out of this corner?